Okay, let's dive right into this. We spend so much time really just obsessing over what happens inside the classroom. The curriculum, the teaching methods, the latest test scores. But today, in this explainer, we're going to explore a truly groundbreaking concept that challenges everything we think we know about where learning actually happens. And more importantly, how human civilization manages to survive at all. So think about it for a second. The school bell rings, the classroom completely empties out, the exams are graded and done. But does the educational journey actually end there? Or is it in reality just beginning? It's one of those questions that seems deceptively simple on the surface, but the answer reveals the invisible scaffolding of our entire society. To answer this, here is our roadmap for today. We'll start with the journey beyond the classroom, move into households and social memory, check out the peer social filter, uncovering relational geometry, trust, institutions, and continuity, and finally wrap up with how education sustains human civilization. Section 1. The journey beyond the classroom, where knowledge travels next. We have to start at the absolute frontier of formal instruction, that exact moment a student actually leaves the building. The lesson is technically over, but the meaning of that lesson, it's about to embark on a fascinating social journey. And this brings us to a crucial new piece of vocabulary, Metagogia. It's a term used to perfectly capture the continuing social life of a lesson once it's out in the wild. Because, as we all know, knowledge doesn't just sit statically in a student's brain. No, it enters families, it bleeds into neighborhoods, digital networks, and public spaces where it's constantly interpreted, questioned, and, honestly, completely transformed. The difference here is pretty stark. We're all super familiar with pedagogy, right? That's the intentional delivery of the lesson by a teacher. But metagogia is what society subsequently does with that meaning. Think of it like this. Pedagogy is the spark. Metagogia is how the fire actually spreads and changes shape as it burns through the community. It's fascinating to really visualize this transition. Picture knowledge literally leaving the structured, maybe slightly sterile environment of the classroom to be negotiated outdoors. It gets debated in communities and shaped through shared human connection. It's no longer protected by the authority of the teacher. It basically belongs to the group now. Section 2. Households and social memory, the first circle of interpretation. Let's see how this builds when the learner brings their newly acquired knowledge straight home to their family. This is what's known as the first circle of interpretation. A lesson almost never encounters an empty intellectual landscape. When a student walks through their front door, they don't just parrot back raw data. They reconstruct the lesson. And that meaning enters a household that's already filled with its own memories, its own biases. Suddenly, you get this amazing intergenerational dialogue. Parents comparing it to their own schooling, maybe grandparents adding their lived experience. This is the exact moment where a formal lesson first mutates into a living, breathing, educational memory. And the people in a household don't just passively listen, do they? They actively reshape the architecture of the lesson. A parent-child dialogue often serves to clarify and reflect, which really strengthens the core concepts. But try talking to a sibling. That quickly turns into peer reinforcement, informal revision, and sometimes a complete reinterpretation of the facts. The lesson is officially alive. Section 3. The peer social filter. Testing knowledge in the wild. But what happens when this knowledge leaves the safety of the living room and hits the playground, the neighborhood, or the digital sphere? Well, things get a lot more volatile. Outside the family unit, the peer group acts as a rigorous and sometimes brutal social filter. I mean, friends aren't exactly neutral observers. They test it. Can this lesson survive being compressed into a joke? Does it align with their specific group loyalties? Will sharing it actually bring social approval or just risk total ridicule? And in our modern era, this whole process is massively amplified by digital commentary. The knowledge is being filtered entirely for its immediate social viability. The ultimate unspoken question peers are really asking here is, can this meaning live amongst us? It's not about whether the physics equation is perfectly accurate or if the historical date is dead on. It's about whether the knowledge can be translated into their specific group language, or weaponized in a debate, or shared to strengthen a sense of belonging. If it can't survive this filter, it just fades away. Section 4. Uncovering relational geometry, the architecture of continuity. Once knowledge actually manages to survive this peer filter, we start to uncover the grand architecture of how communities manage to hold on to meaning over time. Welcome to the realm of relational geometry.
Now, this geometry isn't about triangles or Euclidean math. It's the patterned configuration of proximity, trust, and connection. It's the invisible blueprint linking our schools to families and local governance to civil society. Think about it. Two completely different towns might have identical school buildings and identical textbooks, but wildly different educational outcomes. Why? Because their relational geometry, the specific way they connect and trust each other, is entirely different. When we map this out, it forms an incredibly detailed, multidimensional trajectory across 11 different dimensions. It spirals outward across generations. It expands in depth, in wisdom, and cultural resonance. And the coolest part is, it never truly closes. A lesson doesn't just end, it continuously transforms and transmits through these complex pathways of our collective social space. Section 5. Trust, Institutions, and Continuity. Building the Scaffolding. Let's look at how this geometry builds into the very institutions that protect and govern our societies. Because all of this invisible geometry, it has a massive, real-world purpose. This sequence right here is literally the bedrock of human resilience. It goes like this. Educational transmission generates shared memory. In turn, that shared memory cultivates mutual trust. Trust is exactly what legitimizes our institutions. Legitimate institutions organize cooperation, and it is that cooperation that ultimately sustains civilization. This beautiful recursive loop allows us to accumulate intellectual capital across centuries without having to perpetually reinvent the wheel. But we really need to look closely at trust. It is the least visible, yet absolutely the most indispensable condition here. Our institutions aren't just brick and mortar. They are our accumulated educational memory expressed organizationally. If you break that chain of trust, if the relational geometry weakens, the entire scaffolding collapses. A school building can stand perfectly intact, sure, but if the historical memory and trust within the community erode, the institution completely loses its legitimacy. Section 6. Education sustains human civilization, the grand architecture. Finally, we're going to zoom out to the absolute macro level. We are looking at the entire civilizational horizon. When we look at it from this height, we realize that Metagogia isn't just some niche educational theory. It is the fundamental mechanism by which humanity continuously reconstructs and remembers itself. Civilizations don't survive simply because they build giant monuments or write grand declarations. No, they survive because of these ordinary, continuous, living relationships that carry meaning across the incredibly fragile frontier, separating one generation from the next. I want to leave you with this really profound thought from the text to reflect upon. Education does not endure because it is taught. It endures because somewhere, someone chooses to continue it. Our entire civilization exists today only because millions of ordinary people, parents, siblings, peers, community members, made the quiet, continuous choice to carry the lesson forward. So the next time you think about learning, ask yourself, how are you choosing to continue the geometry of our civilization today?